It's in this link itself.
You can see the link here. Why don't you send it to them?
Yeah, I sent this URL itself. Hopefully that works.
You are going to see this is the link which is showing at my end.
Ma'am, now link is opening.
Yeah, it's the same. I sent the one which I received in the invitation, the one with the help of which I joined. I sent this one as well, the current one. We just received some date sheet. So some people are thinking about it.
No, whether they should or not, they should. The majority hasn't joined this class this semester. Yes.
I
Not
just
on my
thinking it
side.
has a correlation.
Very disappointing for me. Waiting for Ankit to join back. You've been reading? Have you read Sati? What is the legislation's name?
Commission of Sati Prevention Act, 1987.
So,
I have
read it?
and the order.
And yeah, small order. Not much available in terms of writing. Has joined, saying has come. Ankit is still not here. I was just doing a Google search before the class on Sati Prevention Act 1829. And I came across the India Today write-up on this one, little known facts about Sati. I thought this was very interesting. Say that the page I have opened here. You read some of the interesting facts on this. Share. The Polish Sati Pratha, lesser known facts on the bad practice. So this was Sati Regulation Act was passed in 1829 by Lord Bentinck. This was a Bengal Sati regulation which banned the Sati practice in whole of British India on December 4, 1829. So we know what is Sati. Sati, also spelled as Sati, is a practice among Hindu communities. Some lesser known facts on the Sati practice. Derived from the name of the goddess Sati, who immolated herself because she was unable to bear her father Daksha's humiliation towards her husband Shiva. Sati was regarded as barbaric practice by the Islamic rulers of the Mughal period. In the 16th century, Humayun was the first to try a royal agreement against the practice. Akbar was next to issue official orders prohibiting sati, and since then it was done voluntarily by women. He also issued orders that no woman would commit sati without a specific permission from his chief police officers. Akbar has also instructed the officers to delay the woman's decision for as long as possible. Many Hindu scholars have argued against sati, calling it as suicide and a pointless and futile act. By the end of the 18th century, the practice had been banned in territories held by some European powers. And this I did not know. Portuguese banned the practice in Goa by 1515. The The Dutch and the French banned it in Hooghly, Chanchura, then Chinsura and Pondicherry. Sati has occurred in some rural areas of India in the 21st century. According to some official reports, around 30 cases of sati from 1943 to 1987 were documented in India. The practice still occurs today in some parts of India and is still regarded by some as the ultimate form of womanly devotion and sacrifice. Could you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I now I'm trying to find where is my link. It says stop sharing. Presenting, but share this stuff. Stop. You can imagine that recognition of it as an social evil that started way back in 1515, Goa being the first one, and then it has finally we had in 1987. 400 years legal measures, whether small areas or big areas. But till date, we are still having. And so, from where, no, Sati, when this India Today article said Sati is from the Sati uh, Shiva, which immolated herself. But she did not immolate herself with the husband, or the husband was, so just the husband was humiliated. So I find that the origin very strange if you say that it is the word is coming from there. So that's kind of something which is not easy to understand, that how did that sati, the action of by that sati, justified the action of women killing themselves along with their husbands. That's hard to make that connection, at least for me. If you are saying that even till 1987 there were 30 cases in from 43 onwards, so in 40 years we have got 30 cases. That's not that we have come up with it. I think a major incident for the legislation was the Roop Cover Sati, where a lot of coverage was there, and the administration knew that this was going to happen, but they did nothing to prevent the congregation, and more than 2 lakh people congregated to watch that study. At that point of time that we got this legislation. So what are the primary features of this legislation? What are the range of offences under this legislation?
Ma'am, the attempt to commit sati, abetment of it, and glorification.
What is the objective of this legislation? Let's start from there. What is the objective of this legislation?
It is to prevent the commission of sati and its glorification.
So
Or
both commission of sati or so this one, which says offences, there's a list of offences. Attempt to commit, abetment to commit, and if it is committed, abetment to commit, and if it is attempted, glorification of sati. The punishments have been the range of them. So I found this disqualification of election as an interesting one. But the more deterrence I would be denial of inheritance rights. So one can see that these are comparatively innovative sentences which have been given here. And but when you look at the quantum of sentences, you need to look at the legislation itself. So the purpose we have already noticed. We are assuming that limitation of Jammu and Kashmir must have gone with 370 abolition. The definition. The one definition we want to read is glorification. Glorification in relation to sati, whether such sati was committed before or after the commencement of this act, includes, among other things, again, not a exhaustive definition, only an inclusive definition, observance of any ceremony or the taking out of a procession in connection with the commission of sati. Is supporting, justifying, or propagating the justice and the practice of sati in any manner. Arranging of any function to utilize the person who has committed sati. Creation of a trust or the collection of funds or the construction of temple or other structure or the carrying on of any form of worship or the performance of any ceremony thereat with a view to perpetuate the honor of or to preserve the memory of a person who has committed sati. Sati means the burning or burying alive of any widow along with the body of a deceased husband or any other relative or with any article, object or thing associated with the husband or such relative. I'm not understood in this one, what is this with any widow along with the body of any other relative, burning alive with any other relative. Why would any other relative be involved in this one? I've not understood this. Any woman along with the body of any of her relatives, irrespective of whether such burning or burning is claimed to be voluntary on the part of the widow or the woman or otherwise. So in the light of this, we want to look at Janwadi Mela Samiti case. What are the issues in that case? What are the facts? What is it that has happened in that case? Is this one page? So tell me what it is. What is this case about?
There was going to be a ceremony at this. There was about to be an annual Satiji Mela to be celebrated within a temple premises, and the temple was alleged to be a Sati temple or commemoration of the act of Sati, and it was regarding whether the ceremony should happen or not.
Mm-hmm.
And
so what was the reason for asking this question? Should it happen or not happen? Because the argument was that this ceremony amounts to glorification of Sati. What was the counter argument to that?
counter argument to that, it's not glorification.
No, they were saying chundri ceremony has got nothing to do with Sati. ये तो फलां देवी को चुनरी चढ़ाते हैं तो. So then, because this is an indication that how people try to get out of the language of the section. And of course, the judges were also smart. They did not even give us an answer to that. It will be done at a later stage. And I have not come across the case that at what later stage what the judges said in this case. So we do not know what happened at the end of the day. At this point of time, the judges said that's not the question to be decided today. And there is a stay. We will let the stay happen till the case reaches the stage when it is important to decide this question. So the second aspect was that the money which is required for the day-to-day maintenance of the temple, because all the money was freezed. So the manager said we need the money for two purposes: day-to-day maintenance of the temple, and also to support the charity that we are supporting from the fund we collect at the temple. So it's a Sati temple. And the legislation says that Sati temples which are older than less than 20 years old, they have to be demolished. But the older temples have been allowed to stay. The legislation itself says so. So there's a temple, an old temple, a Sati temple, and the woman who committed the Sati is still being presented as the Devi, as the special one, and you allow that temple to continue. And then they are saying that the funds we are collecting in this temple, those funds should be allowed to be withdrawn for the day-to-day needs for maintaining the temple as well as for supporting the charity. And the court said, yes, 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 you can do that. But we cannot allow charities not to be supported. So what is the impact of it all? And also, this is kind of coming from the legislation itself also to some extent. This is because once they look at the legislation, what does the legislation say about the old temples? These are offenses. Then we come to section 7. Power to remove certain temples or other structures. The state government may, if it is satisfied that in that any temple or other structure which has been in existence for not less than 20 years, any form, in essence, for not less than 20 years, any form of worship or the performance of any ceremony is carried on with a view to perpetuate the honor of or to preserve the memory of any person in respect of whom sati has been committed by order, direct the removal of such temple or other structure. So, which is to be removed? Temple or structure which has been in existence for, it is not less than 20 years. What does it mean? Confusing हो गया. If it was in existence for less than 20 years, तब तो समझ आता है. ये तो कह रहे थे government may, if it is satisfied that in that any temple or any structure which has been in existence for not less than 20 years, it may direct the removal of such temple. So those who have been in existence for less than 20 years, उनको नहीं हटा सकते. यहाँ पे not तो हो नहीं सकता. Let's see whether we can find any other volume, any other. Anyone else who can try and find the legislation in a PDF form? India Code. Yes. Section 7. नहीं यही लिखा है. This also, this is from India Code. Power to remove certain temple or other structure. The state government may, if it is satisfied that in any temple or other structure which has been in existence for not less than 20 years, any form of worship, performance of any ceremony is carried on with a view to perpetuate, honor, or preserve the memory of any person who has committed sati by order, direct the removal of such temple or other structures. Okay, so the distinction is that in case of 7.1, it is the state government which has to give the order. In case of other than those which are covered under part 1, subsection 1, it is the collector or the district magistrate which can ask for removal. And 3 says under subsection 1 or 2 is not complied with, the state government or the collector, the DM, as the case may be, shall cause the temple or other structure to be removed through a police officer not below the rank of SI at the cost of the defaulter. So if you have this law and we have Janwadi Mela Samiti, how do you reconcile the two? You see a conflict here between what the judgment has
Mm.
been. So this one is saying, they are saying they want to have chunari. The petitioners are saying chunari is glorification of sati. They are saying no, chunari is not glorification of sati. It is unconnected with that, but it is a sati temple. So if such temple is suggesting to do so, if they're not doing glorification, so if they do day-to-day puja, that does not come to glorification. Then whatever they do day-to-day puja involves, they're doing day-to-day puja in that temple. People come, pay their obeisance, they seek their blessing of the Sati Mata, and they go home. That's not glorification within the meaning. Forget about even chundri.
Ma'am,
Not worship.
even if there is no chundri ceremony or there are no people coming visiting that temple and offering prayers, the fact that a temple exists, a sati temple exists in the name of a woman uh, who had committed sati, it itself amounts to glorification, I believe.
No, because for me, you can have a Sati temple as a tourist spot at one point of time, but not as a practicing religious temple. Because there are temples where, Konark, for example, there's no active puja happening. People go there, let's see, there's such a beautiful temple, the Surya temple, the Sun temple. There's no puja happening. Nobody is not prohibited from entering the sanctum sanctorium and blah, 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 which happens in the functional temples. So whether after this legislation, we should have or could have allowed, it's certain the notification is required. So till the time state government doesn't give notification, the pujas will continue to happen. They will continue to have the requirement of maintaining those temples. They will still keep on boasting that we are supporting charities. So even if they are not talking, they are not wanting to take that position that whether chundri ceremony is part of glorification or not, but whether the fact that it's a functional temple is that itself not covered under any of the sections on glorification. Let's look at those sections again. Glorification says observance of any ceremony or taking out of a procession in connection with something. So this is not happening. Supporting, justifying, or propagating the practice of sati in any manner. Arranging of any function to eulogize the person who has committed sati. Creation of a trust or collection of funds, or the construction of temple or other structure, or the carrying on of any form of worship or the performance of any ceremony thereat, with a view to persuade the honor of or the preserve the memory of the person who committed sati. Fourth में तो straight away fall करता है ना.
Now they've separated the idea of, they said ki, yes, it is a ceremony and we are collecting funds, but they've divorced the idea that, oh, it's not in the, they've not even addressed the fact that whether they are in fact doing it to preserve the memory of a person or not.
No,
So
look
they
at section 2B, subclause 4.
yes,
Part
ma'am,
B
and in the
says
judgment they haven't addressed this at all.
carrying on any form of worship or the performance of any ceremony thereat, with a view to perpetuate the honor of or to preserve the memory of a person who has committed sati. And sati is referring to not only those people who have committed sati after the legislations come into being.
So, I mean,
So in that sense, when you look at this case, it gives you new meanings. Now, one, the objection raised by them was only relating to chundri ceremony. When the petitioner did not say, no, stop pujas in the Sati temple, because the carrying on puja itself is a glorification also. So it is not that the judge did not talk about it. The party, Janwadi Mahila Samiti itself did not raise that question. So in that sense, substantively, one is still not wanting is not even the woman group is not asking for stopping of that practice. So somewhere there is this whole thing that you have a centuries old practice, and as a consequence of that social evil practice, certain temples have been created which are reaping money. And here also, so what they've said that ostensibly a new function of standalone functions will not happen, but on a day-to-day basis, if they are functional temple, that's okay. So acceptance of the past, that no, this has happened in the past, but the legislation does say that these temples can be actually removed. If you're not removing the temple physically, one could have at least issued the notification to say stop pujas in these places. And then, of course, the consequence of that will be that if the pujas are stopped, then the state will have to provide for maintenance. So maintenance can be had. No, we have lots of monuments which are being preserved for tourism purposes. So one could have preserved these places also as tourism spots. That at one point of time, this is what used to happen in India. But nothing of that. The only conversation we have in this legislation is about glorification through a special ceremony. The day-to-day puja, even though this has been brought within the purview of glorification, have not been addressed in this short judgment.
Ma'am, even in the definition of temple, they they just say that it includes any building or other structure, whether roofed or not, constructed or made to preserve the memory or a person in respect of whom sati has been committed, or used or intended to be used for carrying on of any form of worship or for the observance of any ceremony in connection with such commission.
So another example of symbolic legislation on this on the book, but no actions to be taken. No wonder the situation of the women hasn't changed. The Sati Savitri concept still continues. That the women should be so powerful. As Sati Savitri concept is that Sati is the one she is ready to give up her life if her husband is humiliated. That's Sati. Savitri is the one whose husband died, and she then argued with the Yama and said, no, you cannot take him. Then Yama said, okay, I can give you one word, but not the husband. Okay, I want a son. You take that, I'll take your husband. He said, I cannot have my son without my husband. So that's that you have to be really smart to save your husband. You have to do your vratas for husband. So this whole Sati Savitri concept still continues. So even though there has been recognition of the problem women face as wives in various forms of harassment and death, the legislation dealing with it are not meant to be implemented. That's my sense from these legislations. And when you look at how many convictions have happened, how many temples have been removed, we have got just no information. So which means if it is not there, if any temple has been removed, that means that they're still there. And this case is certainly indicating that they're not only there, they're also making money. It means that pujas are continuing in all those places. So glorification continues despite a law being there. The concerns is only about sporadic exhorting of more justification for sati, but day to day you just keep your eyes closed. What do you think? What does the future hold good? What's your sense of what is the role that law can play in improving the conditions of women? And we do know that it can play a role, but what will be the requirements? What is it that is required to make the law effective to deal with issues which have been troubling women?
Ma'am, I think the problem often arises is that there's a major hesitance to complain about something in the first place because they feel like they don't have a choice, that they don't feel like they have any safeguards to their own protection while during the pendency of any such trial or any such evaluation of complaint. So I think rehabilitation for these women is really important, or not necessarily rehabilitation, but just at a very basic level, it all starts from like whether we can empower this woman by providing for education or not. But that's like long-term policy. For short-term, we can at least enable for places her to set up places for her to go to, and make sure that funds are utilized in the way that they were meant for. Because
No,
criminalization,
so let's focus on what are the measures taken so far to improve access of women to seek legal protection, legal remedies. What are the various laws which you would think are oriented towards that? So, what you're suggesting is the social awareness program, re-education. So, these are non-legal measures we are talking about. So, we want, because we're law persons, we're doing this course from the perspective of a law student. So, as a law student, what kind of measures do you think already exist in the law which have been on the face of it focused on giving better access, and what are the other kind of uh, aspects which need to be taken care of if you want to use law as an effective tool for change? We do believe law is an instrument of change, and we have found that many laws have been made for women. Then what are the kind of loopholes we have found in that? So those are the kind of thing we need to think about. That when you look generally as a generic category, that no women laws relating to women, what kind of problems have you found in those provisions or legislations? So first of all, focus on the first question: what provisions exist in our current legal system which can be seen as attempts of the state to provide or improve access to justice to women? We are not on the question whether they have succeeded in achieving the purpose or not, just want to identify. I'll give you one possible example. When we say free legal aid to all women, irrespective of their economic status, that can be seen as one measure where we are trying to say, do not be hesitant, we will provide you lawyers whom you can trust. Legal aid is a concept where we're saying that we will select lawyers who are suitable for this purpose. We will train them, they will handle your case, and there's no expense involved. What are the other examples you can think of?
So, for sexual, most of the sexual offences, there have been fast track courts that have been set up.
Mhm.
Also, in CRPC, for I think for cases of rape, there have been time limits that have been set up under which the trial must end. Also, for women to get access to the police stations, there are special women police stations, special cells, and all these things. But I believe that even if there is a woman police officer in that cell, even if we have
अंकित
a
अंकित
committee,
अंकित बात में जाने से पहले लिस्ट पूरी करो. Then we will say what are the limitations in each one of them. What are the other measures? Because but तो सब में legal aid में but है.
and also in CRPC there is a provision that no woman shall be arrested uh, after the sunset and before the sunrise.
Mhm.
Yes.
Fast track courts are managed by whom? Who are the officers in those courts?
And judicial officers,
Mhm.
magistrates, sessions.
Women judicial officers.
Yes.
So make her comfortable in the court system. We are so therefore we have all this. When you say that these special officers have been appointed, probation of the protection officers in the Domestic Violence Act, These are to facilitate, to convince, to kind of cajole, to encourage her to do that. That's the job of the protection officer. When you said the dowry prohibition officers, so there had been this cadre of people also provision has been made for creation of special cadre of people who are supposed to be looking after the interests of the women alone. And so at a theoretical level, when we said women judicial officers will be only sitting as the judicial officers in cases leading to rape of the men. So very categorically recognizing the need that women do not feel comfortable in the presence of the males to speak up what all has happened. So one can have a list of the things which have been provided for. Whether they have met the purpose of improving their access is the second question to address. So first of all, have that list. Then you can look at whether the fact of free legal aid available to women, has it encouraged, has it been useful for women to use that? So our journal critique of the standard of legal aid for poor has become poor legal aid. So therefore, women, like many other people, have got no trust in them. So even though it is available freely to her, but whether women are motivated to approach them, knowing that she may not get good legal representation. So we have created the special police cells for women. We have appointed women officers in the courts dealing with women issues. But whether those women officers, women police officers, so we are also insisting that there should be more women officers in the police force. Women should be dealing with women when they come to the police station, even if it is not a woman police thana. So all these measures, whether the women who are manning these positions have the sensitivity expected of them. So law assume that if it is a woman, she is already sensitive. But that's not experience, that not has been the experience of people who have examined the functioning of these systems. Therefore, there is again a lacuna there that we are assuming that without special orientation and training, these women will be all sensitive to the issues of women, and men will not be. Men will not be sensitive even after training, if you decide that. So training is not considered essential, and it is assumed that because of the biology of the woman, she will understand the psychology of the woman. Then, what are the measures then would be required? So we say, okay, this has been done and this has got limitation. So for these measures, we can say, okay, provide for training for them. Whether there are any other measures which are required to make the law more effective. There will be two approaches. One is because in dowry prohibition, they have given the minimum but not the mandatory. Make an amendment and make that, they provide for the maximum also. That's one approach to bring about that wherever we have found lacuna in the section, we fill up that. But whether the lacuna are occurring because the structures haven't been addressed, these are only piecemeal legislations. The whole structure of the legal framework hasn't changed. Legal framework still continues to be male dominant. So what are the indicators of that the whole legal structure is male dominant? So look at the manner in which appointment of judges takes place, for example. You can look at each one of those aspects. So what are the parameters? Where is the transparency in appointments? There is no transparency, and we have seen a lot of report. Indra Jaising brought that out, that how so much bias happens against women in appointment of women senior lawyers. So senior lawyers are appointed more by their face value, how much interaction they have had with the judge, how frequently they have been at the same places where the judges are. The women officers, most of the time, they go home after their work because they've got this double duty to do. So they are not in the social circles, and they don't get recognized for the work they do. I think it's kind of very interesting, very necessary to focus on these other aspects as to what extent making amendments in the law will be effective. What are the kind of structural changes in the legislations which are required to change their nature from symbolic to instrumental legislations. And merely having the law is only the first step. After that, what kind of large scale trainings will have to be done? In case of juvenile justice, we did provide that nobody who doesn't have such and such training shall be appointed to the juvenile court. And we appoint people without any training, without any background. So should those structures, those institutions should be declared as void, that if they do not, if they have not been, and if the law says give them training within 2 months of their appointment, if the training is not given, should the law be declared that whatever decision they have given, they will all be void because they do not have the necessary training? So one has to think through to think about that. One is that even with the piecemeal reform, what need to change? But overall, our division of private and public, our division of what is women's work, who women are, unless that perception changes in the construction of the legal provisions, unless the woman's perspective to life is become integral to framing of the laws, things are not going to change. When we did the analysis of cases and the judgments, we kept on saying that how the patriarchal values, which does not consider woman's life as equal of equal worth to the man's life, continue to operate in Chandwadi Mahila Samiti. There's no statement against how bad the practice is and why it should be banned. It's a very short judgment, so we do not know what are the circumstances but such a short judgment. But there's nothing there. Said, there's one sentence we find in the social contract is, yes, we cannot allow the charities to die in the absence of support. There's nothing else. So what have they focused and what they have not focused also tells what is operating there. So supporting charity is certainly more important than making a statement that this practice is still. There's not a recognition that the glorification has still continued. We do not know in this case it is happening or not. They could have said that. The temples have still remained there. State governments have not passed the orders for removal of such temples. Nothing of that sort has been provided for in this session. So this is acquiescing that yes, it's okay to have these temples running and functioning, and they can continue to function as they have been forever. Because it is the responsibility of the state government. They haven't done it. They're not. They could have asked that why is this temple still functioning? They haven't asked that question. And many times it's not that judges all, we do know that judges do raise up lots of social level issues, even though this has not been raised by the parties. Where neither the parties are raising it nor the judge is raising it. Just a technical viewpoint. Okay, Chundri, we will talk about later. This today we will give you the order for drawing the amount. What are the safeguards given for drawing the amount? How much money can they draw? We know. Is anyone? Janwadi. I'm saying constantly Janwadi. It's not Janwadi Medicine, All India Democratic Women's Association. I don't know why it's in my head. I constantly, last sentence also I kept on saying Janwadi Mahila Samiti. All India Democratic Women's, I think it's association. This is chundri ceremony within Sri Rani Sati Ji Mandir. Now, a look at the other aspect of the payment. The submission advanced by Mrs. Hingorani that the temple should be converted forthwith into rehabilitation camp for uncared for ladies is certainly not one requiring any serious consideration. There is no such provision in the statute or in any other law which would warrant such change of user of the premises. So the legislation does not say convert, but it says close. So judges are not going there. Similarly, if out of the income of this institution, any contribution was being made to sustain some social institutions of utility, the support should not die out. The respondent number 2 is free to move the DM of Junjunu in regard to these two aspects, and in case the DM is satisfied that appropriate funds should be released out of the deposit in the bank for one or both of the purposes indicated above. One is maintenance, the other is charity. He would be free to direct such money as may be found necessary to be withdrawn from the bank for being utilized for the purposes as may be specified by the DM in his order to be made. So even though All India Democratic Women Association did raise the issue of saying stop the worshipping, close this temple. So the judges have taken her on word. They could have gone on the substance of the suggestion that this has to stop. The worship has to stop. But that's not how the articulation went of the judge. They merely says, no, there is no provision in the law. The only says close. They're not even mentioned that law talks about closing and not converting. The judge has not bothered to even look at what the law provides for. These are no only examples in the psyche with which the judges are sitting in judgments, indicating that there is no realization of the horror which the practice of sati presents. And having any temples do a horrifying act should not be allowed to be present, excepting as a reminder to the horror that we used to commit on women. I had gone to, my hand is up. My hand up. So in England, they have Tower of London, where they have captured. I think in that only, if I'm not mistaken, they have of course Kohinoor, but they have the other things also, the instruments of torture, and this is horrifying collection of instruments of torture. They put it in a museum. There's a feast to see, go and watch this all. But they are preserving their history to say how horrible, how barbaric we were, so that we do not repeat it again. So it is not that you want to kind of demolish those temples, but convert them into something else, whether a museum or removing, because removing is much more difficult. But no, we don't want to do anything. We don't want to even touch this aspect because it is too sensitive issue.
And also the fact that like the law says that only the state government or the collector and the district magistrate that is appointed by the government, they can only order the removal of the temples. So
Yeah.
I don't think that they will ever do so, because
Precisely.
these sati temples, they enjoy a popular support, and these governments, they exist on popular support only. So the court hasn't been empowered to order these removals.
No. Does the state not order that no, kindly take action under such and such provision? They have never done so.
I don't think they would do that. They've just
They may not do it in this case, but have they never given direction to the state government to say, exercise the power which have been vested in you? But also look at the language when it says you may remove, it's may now. The state government may, if it is satisfied that in any temple, any form of worship or performance is carried on with a view. So now look at the extension. This section does not stop at any form of worship or performance of any ceremony is carried on. But they should be with a view to perpetuate the honor of or to preserve the memory of any sati, then it may by order directly removal. So what is this section saying? That there may be performance or ceremony with a view to honoring the why is the worship happening in the first place? So formulation itself says there may be it may that there can be worship in the temple without glorification, and there will be worship which will be for glorification. So which worship is without for not glorification, which is one? So creating this language itself, which is impossible to implement.
Also, section 2, the definition of glorification, it says that the construction of temple is itself a glorification. The creation of a trust, the
नहीं
construction
अब
of a
तो
temple.
नहीं अब नया तो नहीं बनने देंगे वो तो उसमें आ जाएगा कि हम नया नहीं बनने देंगे but existing temples so it also does not say shall remove, it says may remove if this is the condition. So it is not necessary to remove all the temples. And then it may be removed if worship is being done to glorify, to promote the memory. What for the why is the worship continuing in that temple? Because now she has been seen as a Devi. If she has been made a Devi, then is this not glorification of a Sati? So this section itself is kind of saying don't do anything. Because for you to prove then, okay, this puja is for glorification, this puja is not for glorification, inherently contradictory. The puja itself is glorification. Otherwise, why are you doing puja? She is not a Devi, you have made her a Devi, and you are now worshipping her as a Devi. I don't know, I find that this is kind of very apparently again those legislations where you want to show that, oh, we mean business, but nothing actually you mean. You frame it in that manner that nothing is needed to be done and nothing is done also. So the only thing is that, okay, big ceremonies will not be permitted anymore. Beyond that, nothing. No? I think we are at the end of our course discussion. If anybody has any niggling thought, any thought they want to share, any observations, any questions you have.
Ma'am, about that phrase "not less than 20," I don't understand why is it not talking about any temple and has
No, because
that
they had divided the power that if it is an older temple, then the state government has to do it. If it's a younger temple, then collector can do it. The state government will have to take into consideration a lot of other factors also. Only the district fellow cannot deal with it. So both can be removed, but the younger temples can be removed by the collector and the older temple by the state government. So I was also getting confused when I read it, not less than 20 years. So that उसका बाकी का क्या होगा? So then the second part deals with that aspect. So now we have seen seen some truths about the special legislations for protection of women against domestic violence. So apart from the legislation on the 2000 domestic violence, DB Act is 2002?
2005.
5. So apart from that, we know that these are all, majority of them are just symbolic in nature, not meant to be implemented or actually give any succor to what women are facing.
Ma'am, it would be interesting to note the legislation, like to compare the legislation which was brought under British rule versus after regarding women, to really see what, like, whether they chose to be more aggressive in their approach, or have we chosen to be more aggressive in our approach, or we have remained the same? Because the language has somewhat evolved and seems quite sophisticated sometimes, and but like the fact remains that we are also refusing to change anything.
Yeah. No, because
Because
I should know that Infanticide Act was very, very modern in its thinking of the provisions which were provided for. So that was unheard of or unthinkable at that age when they said community fine if the women child, girl child population is abysmally low in the village. The whole village would be fine. We do not know, means I've not been able to lay my hands on what was the extent of implementation of those laws. I do know that even at the normative level, these are very, very strict laws, which is indicating that they meant business. Allowing a person that if they are suspicious that a newborn baby has been killed, that's a case of female infanticide, police could enter their houses and arrest people. So that is unheard of, no? Because there's so much of parda and so much of exclusion of the police entering the houses and so much of stigma involved in that action that somebody enters your house, some policeman enters your house. And there was no restriction that no, you will not go to the janana and you will not go to this section. Wherever they are suspicious of, they could, the law permitted them to enter. And in 1515, Goa they prohibited. One can also see, this kind of other kind of study that what were the areas and where were the laws prohibited, and after that, where are the which are the areas which are still known to have continue to glorify or to promote sati at even at the social level. These 34 cases, from where have these occurred? So whether these are region specific. So there is a lot of work which can be looked at. But the practices against women continue. So even though we have all this thinking that now law is all for women, but we have seen the reality of the laws which have been made for women. And we have also seen the reality of laws which have been made for all human beings, that how they are also not actually meant for women. Women have to fit into the shoes of the men to get anything from that. So everything is made, all the laws which are gender neutral laws are also for men, and the women specific laws are really not meant to change much. There's a long way to go. And I think as a lawyer, you should take strength from so many innovative judgments. I find very, this whole Vishakha judgment is such a path-breaking thinking that she says, okay, we'll fight Babri Devi individual battle, but it is indicative of a wider malady. We have so many other cases where challenges have been made to the constitutionality of the discriminatory personal laws. They have been most of the time thrown out, but we have made certain dents. When you look at Gita Hariharan, small dent, but there is a dent. When you look at now the amendment which has happened in the case of Kopasnari, huge change by the legislation itself. So we are still, it's a continuous fight. So just because once we know what the reality is, then one can think about clogging where the loopholes are, removing the loopholes. So rethinking, thinking afresh as to what needs to change. And we are talking about as law. Certainly, a lot of changes have to happen in the bringing up of children in the school education, in the curricula. All that is to be there. These are supportive mechanisms. But law has a very, very powerful. It is a very powerful tool if somebody decides to use it. Can be very, very powerful. So, how do you strengthen the law? How do you strengthen the hands of the people who will implement the law? For me, because law is all is handled and dealt with by lawyers and judges. Therefore, law schools are the first ground where education has to bring in critique of the law. The ability to create lawyers with a thinking mind who can see the injustices caused by the law. I did share with you the incident when I was called to the Supreme Court, the death penalty case. There was a Ramdev Chauhan case from Assam, where the accused was given death penalty by the Supreme Court, and he had raised a plea of being a child. So we read his judgment after he has been convicted by the Supreme Court also. And then there was a statement which indicated that he was a child on the date of the offense. So then I got the papers, and then I wrote a paper saying that a child is on the death row. And at that point of time, by chance, Justice Verma happened to visit our faculty. And I mentioned to him this whole thing, because I was very full of this whole thing that there's a child on the death row, and I'm a juvenile justice person, and how can that happen? And there's a lot of injustice happening. He asked me to show him the paper. I gave it to him. He read it. Then he said, "Okay, send me the papers you have on the basis of which you are claiming this." I sent the papers, and they registered suo motu a complaint of violation of human rights. The date of the complaint was noted as the date of the Supreme Court judgment. Then finally, I was called by the Supreme Court saying, "Are you saying that Supreme Court has committed violation of human rights?" I said, "It can happen. It's not that they are wanting to, but they may end up doing that." And he was, of course, furious. Then he says, "How could you file?" I said, "I have not filed this. NHRC on its suo motu has taken cognizance of this situation." So I was off the hook, but this is what happens, that the law can become an instrument of oppression. The judge was so aghast, right up to the Supreme Court, even in the review petition, and we argued. They were so aghast with the idea that a boy of 15 or so has killed 4 people, his employers, employer and wife and sister and daughter, small baby of 2.5 years, the eldest being 35 years. And if he's dealt with as per the requirement of law, which was saying he cannot go to jail, he cannot be kept in a police station even for 1 day. Even though he was a child, but the judge's sense of justice, right up to the second level of review, was that how can you let them go free? Juvenile Justice Act says free. And therefore, he was given death penalty. Finally, after a long 11-year struggle with law back and forth, we finally got him released, because he was a child on that date of the judgment. And the law says you cannot give punishment, imprisonment to a child who is below at that time it was the age of 16. He was barely 14 and a half. There was sufficient evidence, documentary evidence, his school register, other evidences were there. Medical was there by the medical opinion given by the medical board appointed by the court. And the judges just set that aside, and they were not wanting to look at it again. And he was in custody for 18 years. He was in jail on the death row for 18 years. A child of 14 and a half years. So law is very, very powerful, and it's not a question of how are we able to deal with that. I think that's what the glory of the law is, that if you persist and continue to work hard, you can get justice to people. It's not completely hopeless, and there is a very powerful tool in your hands. Think afresh, think fresh, think for the people for whom the law is made. They think of the people who are oppressed by the law, and use it judicially. I hope this course has helped you to critically think about the legal provisions. There are 2 faces of the law. One which is on the face of it seems like just, and then you look at the substantive part of it, you find that it is not really doing what it is claiming to be doing. We say, when you read judgments, don't only read the words, what the judges are saying, but also see what the judges are doing with what they're saying. And then you can get a critical understanding of a judgment. The same goes for the legislation. What it is saying and what is the mechanism it is providing for its implementation. If it is not there, then it is just lip service. Many of the laws meant only for women are only doing lip service. So One has to go out of the box, think of what are the alternatives. We had this another woman, Chandrima Das. So Bangladeshi woman was raped on the railway station, and so this is a personal case, but she got the court to recognize that it was a violation of fundamental rights. She is entitled to compensation from the state because the people who raped her were railways employees, and she was raped on the railway premises. So there has been remarkable lawyers who have got really lots of amendments and changes. The whole Domestic Violence Act is creation of the lawyers collective. Oh yes, lawyers have a very, very important role to provide actual strength to the legislation in the way they interpret, use the law for the promoting justice to the people who are powerless. Sensitization does not happen overnight, does not happen when you are the sufferer. It can come from thinking and examining it from the perspective of the person who has come to you seeking justice. Okay?
Ma'am, I have one question.
Yes, Saloni.
Ma'am, do you think like we need to have a gender justice act like for everyone, like women और her gender and for the men as well, like from like किसी भी तरह का अगर how to say it कि जेंडर के बेसिस पे अगर किसी भी तरह का वायलेशन होता है या फिर इनजस्टिस है या इनइक्वालिटी है, then we should have a gender justice act.
तो वो क्या करेगा?
मतलब जैसे जो भी इनजस्टिस हो रहा है, फॉर एग्जांपल जैसे आपने सरोगेसी के बारे में बताया था या अडॉप्टेशन बताया था, तो लाइक
Gender is not synonymous to women. Gender includes men also, includes women also, it includes the third also. So that is what all of the laws are about. It is our construction of who are the human beings, whether all the human beings are equal or not. It's our construct of human being. On the face of it, we say all human beings are equal, and all the gender neutral are saying, gender neutral laws are saying that, no? All the says if whoever commits murder, whether it's man, woman, third, doesn't make a difference. But the moment it comes to dividing the human race, okay, so in the gender one, we say everybody is included. But we do know that the life experiences of people who are not in the majority, who are minority for some reason, who have a lesser status in the society, for whether for the due to their sex, sexual orientation, caste, religion, education, um, economic resources, any of the aspects because of which they are lesser. What is the mechanism provided by law to make them equal? So law say they're all equal, but in reality they're not equal. So what has been the techniques in law which have tried to bring this, suppose this is a more powerful person, this is a less powerful person. This is a rich man, this is a poor man. So the law says, I will provide free legal aid to you so that you can also fight equally. Mechanism for equality. So that can happen only once we recognize that they are unequal in many respects. But what we have done is, in gender neutral laws, we have looked at how men behave, what men do, what what are the challenges the men have, how do they find solutions to them. All those aspects are inbuilt in, have guided the formation of the legal norm, the gender neutral legal norm. So whether you're a minority, whether you're a powerless, whether you are a Dalit, whether you are a woman, whether you are disabled, whatever is the category, you have to be, you can be given benefit or support only if you fit into the experiences of the men. If your experiences are different, Then we will say we will make special laws for you, which means that you are a special human being, you are not a normal human being. So the moment we say that there are certain people who are normal human beings, and the law will be made for them, then all those other people, women, become special. Women give birth, they are special. And special is not seen as a positive category. Special is seen as a weak category. The person with disability are not seen special as a better category, as to be honored. They are seen as lesser human beings. So anybody who is not like men, they are lesser human beings. So if the legal structure is created on that edifice, then certainly there will be some people who will suffer because they are considered as unequal, not worthy of the standard. And therefore, unless they fit into the structures which are suitable to men. So, look at our house. The houses are made for whom? Are they made? Our children, when a new baby is born in a house, then you start looking at the house to see whether the corner of the table, the child can bang his head on. Therefore, you would want to put some protective corner on that one. When a new child is born, then you start looking at, okay, where are the electric switches, these sockets? Can the child put his finger into that? So then you start, the house was not meant for that child. The child is also remaining in that house. The house is, look at the height of the table chair. These are all suitable for adults. Children have a lot of struggle. They fall down from the bed, the height of the bed. So we have not made even our homes child friendly. It's only when a child is born that you start thinking that ये कौन सा रंग करा ले बच्चे के लिए कौन सा रंग अच्छा है. So your orientation changes, but because it's your child, you have love and affection relationship, you do the changes with pleasure. But when it is somebody else, some other person who is not like you, then it is a favor you are doing to those people. Therefore, doing favor to women, doing favor to minority, doing favor to the children, a person with disability. That's how we have constructed the human being. So, Saloni, for me, the answer is that it is of no consequence. What we are seeing is that even when you make, so when you are saying gender act, I don't know what you meant actually by that even the usage of that word. So we have this, we look at that legislation. What was that? Transgender Persons Act. Has it made actually done any justice to them? When they are sexually violated, what is the punishment? So sexual violence against them is less penal than sexual violence against women. By what logic? These human beings are even lesser human beings than women. So somewhere, if we do not recognize all human beings as equal, worthy of equal protection, equal respect, equal dignity by the law, then the law will keep on coming like ठीक है इसको favor कर दो उसको favor कर दो क्योंकि जो सबसे ज़्यादा favored है वो तो normal है. So it is the construction of human being in the law which has determined what kind of norms are being created, what norms are seen as favorable. So actually they do not provide any favor.
Ma'am, one more suggestion. Ma'am, someone like me who are willing to pursue a career like legal researcher, what I should to do and from where I should start?
Gender justice course का सवाल है.
Yeah, I'm interested in gender justice, but child right is equally.
आपका research की बात कर रहे हो. Gender justice
Yes,
की कहाँ बात कर रहे हो?
but ma'am, research in like gender justice topic or like child right, my area of interest.
So find out the research institute there which are focused on this. Lawyers Collective में women का section है, हक में children का section है. There will be more. Find out who all are. There are so many groups which are looking for good researchers.
बट मैम मतलब लाइक कि जैसे बहुत सारे रिसर्चर्स जो होते हैं वो सोशियोलॉजी और लॉ को मिक्स करके उसके बाद कि सी दिस इज द लॉ और इसका मतलब कि इम्पैक्ट ये है, या फिर दिस इज द पॉलिसी फॉर चाइल्ड बट ये ऐसे काम नहीं कर रहा, तो दैट इज मिक्स विथ लॉ। और मतलब थोड़ा कुछ एक्स्ट्रा आइडिया अगर आप दे सको दैट वुड बी लाइक वेरी बेनिफिशियल इफ यू कैन।
So what is the problem with sociology being mixed with law? Law is always mixed with sociology. There can be no law without sociology. Law is meant for society only.
No, that's right, ma'am. But like we take the example of law faculty. In law faculty, we are not offered any course or like for like legal research. But in ILI, they provide a short course for like legal researching. So I do not know ki how to start and what to do. But
Okay,
that.
okay. I think when the new syllabi comes into force, we have introduced at least a paper called legal writing. That would have, once that comes into force, then you will have a paper there. And otherwise, you will have to kind of take out a book in the library on legal research and find out how to go about it. At master's level, we do have a course, compulsory course on research methodology. Come for masters, if you want to learn through the methodology, to be taught in the subject, then at this point of time, that's the option. Otherwise, do your self-study and take out the books in the library. Even on the net, you will find lots of information is there.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, shall we stop recording?